Hi, guys, and welcome back to Magnifique, your favorite podcast for all things fashion illustrations, fashion plates, fashion caricatures, really just fashion artwork as a whole. Today, we do, as you guessed, we do talk about fashion artwork, fashion caricatures, illustrations, but mostly illustrations and how they play a role in advertising. And also we'll talk about some of the big names. So sit back, relax. I don't even think I told you that my name is Gabrielle. Maybe I did, and who's really to say? Who's really to say? Right beside me, I have my eyebrow dye that I plan to do after I record this, and I will be so for real with you. I want to do it right now. I want to do it right now while I'm recording. I don't know if you can hear it at all. A little ASMR moment. I want to do these eyebrows right now as I'm recording and telling you about caricatures and fashion. But I will be so brave. I'll be brave. I can do hard things. Although it's going to be so hard. I'm going to be thinking about it the entire time. I got brow tint and a lash lift kit from Amazon. I just rediscovered Amazon. I was doing so good. I was 3 years clean off of Amazon ordering, and then I just remembered that it existed, and I'm having a hard time. But I will separate the church and the state in due time. Anyway, I chose to research fashion illustrations in general because I knew not a thing about it. I did not know a singular. You could ask me a question. I don't know. Mind blank. Head empty. No thoughts. But so that's really what inspired this. Like I said, we're going to go through the genesis of caricatures all the way up into magazines that really just relied on illustrations. So that's kind of where we're going to go. Historical heavy. None of this occurs pre-1960. So if that's not your vibe, that's totally okay too, but recommend some modern topics for me, please, so much, please. Thank you. Email us at magnifiquepod@gmail.com or find any of our links and just give us suggestions. I love to learn. I will research anything. Full disclosure, this wasn't my favorite topic. I know it all. It's not a lack of knowledge. I just found it unexciting. And I feel bad about that, but part of learning is learning what you don't like, and I'm sorry that I'm going to tell you about a topic that I don't really love, but I'm pretty knowledgeable on, so just hang tight. Yeah, let's get on into it. So before we talk about fashion illustrations, we have to talk about caricatures and the use of caricatures in fashion. So let's do just that. So the term caricature is an Italian word deriving from caricare, which means to load or to charge with subtext. While caricatures were used for various purposes throughout history, they were particularly prominent in the subject of fashion during the 20th century. The roots of fashion caricatures can be traced back to literary, religious, and artistic traditions. Beyond satire, the caricatures also served to create respectful engravings of national dress. Notable or quote-unquote serious artists who employed this form included Abraham Bosse, and J.D. St. Jean, while satirical and observation art was championed by artists like Jacques Callot. You would think that since most art forms in the fashion space started and were prolific in France, with France's increased censorship of artists in the 18th century, Holland rose as a hub for caricature production. The 18th century caricature evolved over time, starting with a focus on political subjects in the first half of the century, and then decided to have a little shift to social subjects in the second half of the century. So social meaning people, events, social concepts, really what have you, Themes that were frequently depicted included the rapid pace of fashion trends, new textiles, and bodily silhouettes. The spread of fashionable items and ideas encouraged the growth of appearance-related trades such as wig making. By the end of the 20th century, caricatures began to reflect broader art, historical, and social systems. M. Dorothy George, a British museum catalogist, analyzed caricatures as a valuable representation of real-life events. In the 19th century, artists like Thomas Rowlandson gained popularity through publishers such as Ackerman. The line between fashion plates and caricatures were often blurred, with artists creating ready-made caricatures to provide fashion information and express a particular mood. Fashion caricatures remained prominent in the media until about World War II. They were instrumental in satirizing the commodification of dress and presenting fashion as a form of theatric performance. Christian Dior's new look of the late 1940s, with its dramatic silhouettes, was a particular subject for caricatures. It also inspired the work of fashion photographers like Cecil Beaton, who had used composite photos in high-style magazines like Vogue to create the similar artistic sensibility. The widespread adoption of televisions in the 1950s led to the decline of fashion caricatures as the dominant art form in media, although they've been used sparingly and often with irony since its initial decline. The art form continues to offer a unique view into the world of fashion history. I forgot to mention, for those baddies who like to follow along at home, a bulk of this knowledge and flow come from the Encyclopedia of Clothing and Fashion, Series 3, Volume 3, by Valerie Steele. I will leave a link to it below. I found a PDF online, and it's been my kind of roadmap through all things fashion. So I like it. If anything's wrong, let me know, because I have relied heavily on it. So, eek. Anyway, back to the regularly scheduled episode. So in the same conversation as caricatures, we find ourselves talking about fashion plates. And you might be thinking, oh my God, literally what is a fashion plate? I've never heard of this ever. Do I eat dinner off of it? No, ideally not. But a fashion plate is a small, often hand-colored engraving depicting the latest fashions. These images are kind of a precursor to modern fashion photography. It was a means of disseminating fashion trends from the 18th to the earliest 20th century. Unlike the exaggerated and often satirical fashion caricatures, fashion plates presented an idealized, aspirational vision of the latest styles. They were meticulously rendered to showcase the fashion designer's intent and the intricate details of the garment. They were a vital component of fashion magazines and periodicals, serving both as a guide and as inspiration for consumers like dressmakers. The origins of the fashion plate trace back to the 16th century with the publication of the first quote-unquote costume book. These books documented various regional and historical styles. This concept was later popularized on a wider concept in the 17th century by artists like, and bear with me, Wenceslaus Haller, whose detail engravings helped spread fashion information all across Europe. Following a brief decline in popularity in the late 17th and early 18th century, fashion plates were revived by dressmakers, who used them as a crucial tool for their trade. They served as a visual guide for their own creations and a way to recommend styles to their client. The 19th century publishing boom provided the perfect conditions for the rise in fashion plates, with, of course, French plates in particular absolutely dominating the industry. Like I said, when you think of anything related to fashion, it always goes back to France, particularly Paris, always and forever. Amongst the most prestigious contributors to the fashion plate was Heideloff's Gallery of Fashion, which produced over 30 plates between 1797 and 1801. Eek! That's a lot in just a short period of time for back then. setting a high standard for quality and detail. The mid-19th century saw a new generation of prolific artists, including the Collins sister. There's three of them: Heloise Lalore, Anais Tudos, and Laurel Noel. They created some of the most iconic images of the era. And additionally, the House of Worth. We know the House of Worth. We love the House of Worth. But they used fashion plates by artists like A. Sandoz, who further idealized the modern woman, presenting a refined version of haute couture. The early 20th century marked a period of innovation in fashion illustrations. Paul Reeb pioneered the potoir technique, which is a detailed stencil technique that revolutionized fashion printing. This technique brought him immense success, particularly in his work with designers Paul Poiret. The late 1920s and 1930s saw a shift toward a more artistic and explorative style, which was led by artists like Carl Erickson, Georges Lepape, and Christian Berard, all of which infused their work with impressionist qualities. Today, fashion plates are a rare sighting in mainstream media, largely was replaced by fashion photography. However, their legacy endures as a testament to the art of fashion illustration and its historical role in shaping our understanding of not only style, but of advertisement. While the fashion plate was a highly detailed and often idealized representation of a garment, the rise of the individual fashion illustrators coincided with the development of fashion journalism and a shift in how fashion was kind of consumed. The earliest forms of fashion illustration can be linked to the 16th century costume book, which, in conjunction with the engraving techniques pioneered by individuals like Johannes Gutenberg, made the mass distribution of fashion art possible. Initially, fashion illustration was closely tied to the fashion plates, appearing in magazines such as Le Mercure, Gallant, and the Ladies' Magazine. However, as fashion photography emerged, again, a key distinction became apparent. While photography could capture the clothes with fabulous realism, of course, it often lacked the ability to create the aura or the vibe that the illustrator could kind of instill in their unique artistic style. There was this emphasis on mood and movement and the designer's vision that became the core strength of fashion illustration. Many early illustrators remained anonymous, but over time certain artists gained prominence and became more integral to fashion houses in which they worked with. The magnificent designer Paul Poiret, for instance, famously collaborated with Paul Reeb on the groundbreaking book Les Robes de Paul Poiret. Reeb was celebrated for his use of bold lines and jewel tones, which perfectly encaptured the modern, liberated spirit of Poiret's designs. And we'll talk about more about Paul Reeb in a few minutes, actually. The art form itself flourished throughout the early 20th century, with artists developing distinct styles that came to define eras. Examples of notable illustrators include René Grau, known for his dramatic, elegant use of lines and color work in his work for Christian Dior, and Erte, whose Art Deco styles became synonymous with the Roaring Twenties. Even as photography became the most dominant form of fashion media and fashion advertisement, illustrators continued to be used sparingly, for sure, but often to add a touch of whimsy and artistry. Our lovely, lovely man, Marc Jacobs, is but has used. During his tenure at Louis Vuitton, he commissioned contemporary illustrators to create work to capture the essence of his varying collections. I think he only did it like a few times. I don't think it was like his shtick. No, here's the thing though. I didn't look that up to confirm it. My encyclopedia just said he used them, and I said, okay, great. Taking that. Before we dive into the works of Paul Reeb, I want to talk about another artist who is among the celebrated fashion illustrators that defined the early 20th century. Every time I say that, I want to say the earliest 20th century. So forgive my brain. Anyway, George Barbier, he stands out as a pivotal figure. He was born in Nantes, France, and Barbier then, eventually, made his way to Paris, where he became an early adopter of, and some may say pioneer of, the Art Deco design movement. His work transcended and embodies the very essence of eras and elegance and modernity. Barbier's illustrations were renowned for their portrayal of women who epitomized the grace and beauty of the time. He had a unique ability to render just the most flattering images of women, really. His distinctive avant-garde designs and significant contributions to leading fashion magazines made him highly sought after. Barbier's name is frequently mentioned in the same tone and same conversation as Paul Reeb, creating bold, stylized, and atmospheric images that graced the pages of some of the most prestigious publications like Vogue or La Gazette du Bon Ton. What set Barbier apart was his exceptional talent for encapsulating the spirit of haute couture within his work, reflecting not only the intricate designs of the garment and the details, but also the vibrant and often opulent social scene of the period. His illustrations were more than just fashion plates, they were vignettes of glamorous lifestyles. But beyond his prolific work in fashion illustration, he also ventured into set and costume design. He created fantastical and elaborate costumes for performers all across Paris, further cementing his reputation as a versatile and visionary artist. His influence on the visual culture of the Art Deco era is completely undeniable, leaving behind a legacy of his fashion art. Okay, just based on vibes, I think this is what you guys are really here for. Just as George Barbier was a master of the Art Deco aesthetic, Paul Reeb played a pivotal role in shaping the modern fashion illustration. A multifaceted French artist, Reeb contributed to various Parisian journals as a fashion designer and illustrator. His collaborative work with couturiers and his technique, undeniable technique, incredible work, just really left a mark on the field of fashion itself. Reeb's most significant collaboration began in 1908 with Paul Poiret. He illustrated Poiret's dress collection in the groundbreaking portfolio titled Les Robes de Paul Poiret racontées par Paul Reeb. Now, clearly, I don't speak French, but this project was instrumental in launching both men into the forefront of Parisian fashion. The Pauls were introduced after Reeb's work on his satirical collaborative journal, Les Témoins, where his bold and modern styles stood out. Reeb was one of, or among, the first illustrators to extensively use the pochoir technique, which was a method involving a bronze or a zinc stencil that would help you meticulously build up layers of color, resulting in some of the most rich and vibrant designs with immaculate graphic quality. This technique was a cornerstone of his aesthetic and revolutionized the fashion printing at the time. Eventually, Reeb got too big for Paris. His influence expanded far beyond Paris. So in 1919, he moved to New York City and contributed to 7 issues of Vogue. Really, the 1910s were made for Paul Reeb. He also, in the 1910s, collaborated with couturier Jeanne Paquin in their portfolio La Inventelle et la Ferrure chez Paquin. This was just before he moved to New York, but I felt like the New York part was more important. Not to put anything over another, but 1919 he moves to New York and he contributed to 7 issues of Vogue. And he was one of the first fashion illustrators to venture into Hollywood. He worked as an art director and designers on films like Male and Female, which starred Gloria Swanson. He then returned to Paris in 1930, so a brief 11 years in the States, and he continued to work on his book Choi, Choix. And he also embarked on a working relationship with Coco Chanel, our favorite Nazi. She's not my favorite. I don't have a favorite, but I cannot help but every time that I talk about Gabrielle Chanel, I need to mention that Gabrielle Chanel is a Nazi. Anyway, so he worked with Gabrielle Chanel on designing jewelry, and he was recognized by the Légion d'honneur for his exceptional artistic achievements. Unfortunately, everyone has to die, but he passed away in 1935 due to a heart attack. But his legacy as a pioneer of modern fashion remains forever. It takes some time to pull up Polly Reebe's work. I also have George Barbier's work, and George Barbier is very much exactly what you would think of when you think of like Vogue illustrations. This is very much fashion illustration core. I would expect nothing less. This is exactly what I expected. I'll post some photo examples on the Magnifique Insta page. Probably as a story. No, I'll post it. Don't worry. But unfortunately, I feel like if there were any competition, Polly Reebe would just blow George Barbier out of the water. This is insane. I am just called. There is a Polly Reebe photo or illustration, a lithograph, if you will, that has a pig in it. I'll definitely post this one, but it's kind of entrancing. I love it. Is this public domain? I kind of want this in my home. Anyway, let's talk about fashion magazines, because that was a derailment, to say the least. So, just as influential illustrators like Polly Reebe helped define the aesthetics of a new era, fashion magazines were also essential to creating and promoting the design visions that became trends. They were and remain the cornerstone of the fashion ecosystem. The earliest publication to feature fashion was the French journal Le Mercure Galant, which was published in 1672. However, it wasn't completely dedicated to fashion. The first publication to primarily focus heavily on fashion was the Ladies' Magazine, which launched in 1770. This was to address the public's growing demand for recurring articles in the fashion sphere. Early fashion magazines were known for their high production values, featuring very detailed images and steep prices. They were pretty expensive. And as a result, they were primarily accessible to the wealthy elite. The dominant French style was very evident in the production. Luckily, in the 19th century, as innovations had price cuts to the printing and the production, this made the magazines more affordable and more accessible to a wider audience. This, in conjunction with increased literacy rates, led to a boom in readership. We also saw Godey's Ladies' Books, a major American publication, which was famous for setting the record of 150,000 copies sold in 1861. We'll talk about more of Godey's Ladies' Book in just a moment. But fashion magazines created a new form of media that made high fashion news more accessible and provided a platform for high society gossip. While they faced competition from department store catalogs and shop-specific magazines, the general fashion periodical offered a view into trends and styles. When Condé Nast acquired Vogue in 1909, he revolutionized the magazine's approach to interpret high fashion for American society. He shifted its focus to provide more practical advice and a direct connection with Parisian haute couture. Today, conventional fashion magazines remain heavily reliant on advertisements, which kind of tie them down to directly reporting on the trends. And this dynamic can be challenging in the modern era of rapid trend cycles. But their influence as tastemakers and as promoters of design remain strong. I think there are a lot of parallels to modern magazines and ancient magazines, vintage, old, the high society gossip. I think that still reigns true as seen in like tabloids. So I think not much has changed in the era of fashion, but you will notice that in fashion magazines of yesteryear, I guess, we saw a lot more illustrations. We saw a lot more fashion plates in terms of advertisement. Now we notice a lot more photographs. We see a lot more photographs, and I would go as far to say that is primarily what we see in terms of advertisement, which is what I really wanted to dig deeper into there. But let's talk about Godey's Lady's Book. So Godey's Lady's Book was founded in Philadelphia by Louis Antoine Godey, and this was created with the explicit goal of emulating popular European magazines, offering a wide range of content to entertain and inform its readers. While it primarily featured fashion, its pages also included travel, recipes, poetry, sheet music, really what have you. And Godey collaborated with numerous artists to include this rich, widespread offering of material. At its peak in the 1860s, the magazine had a remarkable circulation of 150,000 subscribers, making it one of the most widespread periodicals of its time. The success was due in large part to its editor, Sarah Josephia Hale. Hale's contributions steered the magazine's content and helped it stand out from its competitors. The magazine's primary audience was homemakers, providing them with practical advice, tips, and inspiration for everything in the home and how to behave outside of the home. Okay. Godey's Lady's Book was particularly influential in shaping American fashion. It regularly featured fashion plates with the latest French styles, and these plates were used by dressmakers and women across the country to be used as templates or inspiration to create their own fashionable garments. The magazine provided a direct connection to the world of haute couture, making it more accessible to a public to see the center of Europe's fashion hub. Despite its success, Godey's Lady's Book eventually fell to the competition of newer high fashion magazines like Harper's Bazaar. The publication ceased in 1989, just before the massive rise of Vogue. And speaking of Vogue, to wrap everything up in the bow, I wanted to give a more recent magazine depiction. So, transitioning from the foundational influences of magazines like Godey's Lady's Book, Vogue emerged to redefine the fashion periodical. I cannot say that word to save my life. Vogue emerged to define the fashion periodical for the 20th century and current. It was founded in 1892 as a weekly high society periodical. Vogue was transformed into a global fashion authority when it was purchased by Condé Nast in 1909. Under his ownership, the magazine's formula for success was simple, yet low-key revolutionary. It was to efficiently and clearly disseminate the latest fashion knowledge and trends to an ever-expanding audience. Vogue's legacy is largely due to its visionary and editor-in-chiefs, each of whom left an incredible mark on the identity of Vogue. So we'll start with Edna Woolman Chase, who was the editor-in-chief from 1914 to 1958. Nope, 1952. It's right in front of me. I don't know why I said 1958. Anyway, she is the first long-serving editor. Chase established Vogue's reputation for elegance and sophistication. She was instrumental in expanding the magazine's reach internationally and garnering international coverage, steering the content through both World Wars and the Great Depression. So she saw some stuff. Jessica Davies, who was the editor-in-chief from 1952 to 1963, an 11-year span, she brought a business-minded approach to the magazine focused on practical and commercial aspects of fashion. She's credited with bridging the gap between haute couture and ready-to-wear and making high fashion more accessible. Next, we have Diana Vreeland, who was the editor-in-chief from 1963 to 1971. I'd say one of the shortest tenures, but during her tenure, she had covered and documented the youthquake fashion movement as well as the psychedelic fashion movement, and she transformed Vogue from a publication of style into a cultural revolution, using layouts and bold editorial concepts to capture the zeitgeist of the 60s. Next, we have Grace Mirabelle, and she was the editor-in-chief from 1971 to 1988. And in contrast with Vreeland's extravagance, Mirabelle sought to make fashion more relatable to the modern working woman. She focused more on practical sportswear and inspired looks and more down-to-earth aesthetics. And this was in response to the era's changing social landscape. This was around the time that we saw the athleisure come into prominence and more sportswear come into prominence, as I just mentioned. And it was the 80s. Everybody was wearing polyester sweatsuits. Next, we have my girl, my Lord and Savior, Anna Wintour. And she was the editor-in-chief from 1988 to 2025, this year. She announced that she was stepping down as the editor-in-chief. Wintour's tenure is incredibly transformative. She debuted the first blue jeans on the cover of Vogue for the first time ever, signaling a new era where high fashion embraced street style and youth culture. Her long-standing leadership solidified Vogue's position as the world-leading fashion magazine. Vogue's longevity, spanning 130 years, give or take, obviously, is a testament to its ability to evolve with the times. It's consistently employed the most influential illustrators and photographers of its time, spanning throughout eras. And by adapting its content and visual style, Vogue has remained at the forefront of the fashion world, providing readers with efficient, clear, and aspirational looks inside the world of style. So to use the phrase again, to wrap it all up in a bow, modern fashion advertisement, modern fashion visualizations really wouldn't be anything without fashion illustrators and illustrations and fashion plates. So I give all my love in the world to all the fashion illustrators out there. We couldn't have done it without ya. Thank you so much. So I hope you enjoyed this look into the artistic side of the fashion space. Like I said, it was really history heavy. I've been doing a lot more history heavy episodes. It just fills my heart with joy. But if you want more modern topics, a more modern look into the world of fashion illustrations even, if you want me to do a little deep dive, you're like, oh, I know this person is doing fashion illustrations at present. I want to learn more about that. Can you tell me more about that? Yes, literally tell me what you want to hear. And I'll give it to you. Maybe. If it aligns with what I care about. But that's me. That's me. That's Polly Reeb. That's George Barbier. That's Anna Wintour. That's really it. I hope you enjoyed. I will leave my links down below. Like I said, my main source was a encyclopedia of clothing and fashion, but I had some supplemental research to kind of fill in the gap, so I will leave that down below as well. But in the meantime, follow my links. I'm trying to be an influencer. I don't want to be an influencer, but I think I have to just to get more people to listen to this, I suppose. Anyway, I'm going to go dye my eyebrows and do a lash lift kit that I got from Amazon as well. So thank you, Jeff Bezos, for that. Okay, cool. Bye.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.